LEGO Star Wars Walkers are arguably the most fan-favorited and the most hyped-up sets of the entire theme. So because of that, I'm going to do my best and attempt to rank every single one of them. And I'm not going to lie, this is probably going to be one of the more controversial videos I've made. I'm looking at my list right now and I'm thinking there's probably going to be quite a few people that are going to disagree with my picks. So if you disagree, go ahead and voice your opinions in the comments, and if you agree, you can voice your opinion on that as well. Anyways, I have a total of 33 separate sets to get through, and before I get into it, I do have to say I'm not including UCS sets, and I'm also not including microfighters. So starting off the list at the 33rd spot, the worst LEGO Star Wars Walker in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion as well, is of course 75201 First Order AT-ST. Now I've actually talked about this set a lot, especially recently, and every single time I talk about it, I always say the same thing. I have no idea why LEGO didn't just make a normal First Order AT-ST and then have some type of feature to where the head could pop off, but instead they quite literally gave us half a set being a headless AT-ST. I have no idea who is over this set, and I have no idea how it even made it past the drawing board. I mean, literally in the meeting room, someone had the idea to make a headless AT-ST and every single person agreed. Think about that. To this day, I just don't understand why this exists, and it's quite literally one of the worst sets of all time. Anyways, continuing on to the 32nd spot, I actually have a polybag that a lot of you guys have probably forgotten about or never even seen, being 30006 Clone Walker. This was actually given away for free as some type of promotional set in the UK, and then it was later also sold at UK stores, so I actually don't think this was ever even available in the US, but as you can tell, it's really not much. It's just a polybag with a clone trooper and a very squished down version of an ATRT, if you even would call this an ATRT, although at least it is a complete walker and a complete build, and that's why I put it one spot higher than the First Order AT-ST. Next up at the 31st spot, I have the Imperial Walker from 75165 Imperial Trooper Battle Pack, and don't get me wrong, this is in my opinion one of the best battle packs ever made. I actually think it's probably a top 5 battle pack of all time, but that's pretty much 100% because of the minifigures. The walker itself is just not that great. I'm not sure what LEGO was going for here. It kind of resembles like a miniature AT-ST, but not really. And I know that for battle packs, LEGO usually just makes up random builds to complement the minifigures, but I think in this case they could have just came up with something better, because I think this looks kind of ugly. Like I said, it kind of resembles a miniature AT-ST, but not really. And speaking of AT-STs, up next at the 30th spot, I have the original, being 7127 Imperial AT-ST. Now this set was released all the way back in 2001, and it very clearly would not hold up today in 2024. I mean, if you look at it, it does just look pretty rough. It was the early days of Star Wars. They were figuring things out still, and at this point in time, they really just could not do an AT-ST very efficiently. I'd even go so far to say it's not really even up to par with the other sets from 2001, but at least it resembles an AT-ST, and they actually gave us a full set and not just 2 legs. Up next at the 29th spot, I actually have the ATRT side build from 8098 Clone Turbo Tank. Now a lot of people actually really like this little walker build that's in this set, because it actually is one of the most accurate depictions of an ATRT directly from LEGO. As you guys might know, the official LEGO ATRTs are very oversized, and this one is pretty much minifigure scale, which is great. However, there's just not much going on and it doesn't look the best. Really the only good thing about it is that it is to scale. There's been plenty of mocks of actual minifigure scale ATRTs that look leagues and leagues better than this, and that's why I kept it towards the back of the list. However, I will give it credit for being the accurate size. And all of the same things apply to the ATRT side build that was featured in 7515 Clone Turbo Tank from 2016, although I put this one spot higher because it is a bit of an upgrade. It's a bit beefier and is also dark green because it's based off of Kashyyyk, and I just think that looks a bit better, but still, like the last one, I like that it is a properly sized ATRT from LEGO themselves. However, at the same time, there's just not much going on, and there's definitely mocks out there that are way better. Anyways, moving on to the 27th spot, I have one of the most famous battle packs of all time, being 8014 Clone Walker Battle Pack, and again, this is one of the most iconic and best battle packs ever made because it was such a perfect army builder. You pretty much got 3 regular white clone troopers as well as a clone gunner, all for only $10, which was a very great deal back in 2009. Although figures and army building aside, the walker is the main topic of this video, and a lot of people really like this walker build, and I think it looks cool, although I don't think it's as good as people say. I think because this is such a top tier army builder, people just go ahead and assume that the walker is also top tier, and it's definitely good, although I don't think it's as great as people say, and that's why I kept it towards the back of the list, but I still like the build. And then up next at the 26th spot, I have a bit of a hot take for being over the 2009 Clone Walker Battle Pack, and that's the Walker in 75089 Geonosis Troopers from back in 2015, and this is certainly not a better battle pack than the one that I just talked about, although I do think the walker itself is a bit cooler color. I really like the dark orange and gray color scheme. I also like how it can hold two troopers and they're facing in opposite directions. And my favorite part about it is definitely that big stud shooter turret on the bottom. Most of the stud shooters are bad, especially the blasters. They look awful, but the big turrets where you twist the thing on the back and it spins and fires all the stud shooters at once, I think those are really cool, and I think it adds a lot to this walker and makes it really fun. Up next at the 25th spot, I have a fan favorite being 4482 ATTE from all the way back in 2003. And like I said, this is a fan favorite because it's pretty cool looking and decent for the time. And the reason I say decent is because I actually don't think this set is as good as it could have been even for 2003. If you look at pictures of this set or own it in person, you'll see that it's just very flat and doesn't really do the greatest job at resembling an ATTE. And yes, the actual hole is just a bit too flat, but I really think the main issue is that the legs are just too short, and I think this would have been a very easy fix for LEGO back in 2003. All they had to do was make the legs maybe 2 or 3 studs taller and it would look pretty good, although they didn't, and that combined with the body being pretty flat as well just makes the whole set not look as good as it could, although I did put it at the 25th spot because I mean, come on, it is the original ATTE. And then up next at the 24th spot, this one might be a bit controversial, but I actually have the ATRT from 75280 501st Legion Clone Troopers. Now, a lot of people really dislike the oversized ATRTs, and I'm actually kind of the opposite. I think they look really cool. Yes, they're not accurate, and I'm a sucker for accuracy, although because these ATRTs are so oversized, LEGO can add a lot of detail onto them, and I think it makes them look really cool, especially on display or in large numbers. Although I have to say that the one that came in this 501st Battle Pack for 2020 is definitely the weakest of the oversized ATRTs in my opinion. The detail is there for the most part, although they just completely mess up the shaping around the top area. They use those flat tile pieces when they should have used the curved pieces that all the other oversized ATRTs used, and it just doesn't look as good compared to its counterparts in my opinion, and that's why I gave it the 24th spot. Moving on to the 23rd spot, I have 7657 ATST from 2007. This was the second standalone ATST they made, and I think it looks pretty good for the most part, although there's just something off about the head to me. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but something about the head is just kind of in this like uncanny valley for me, and it just looks a bit off. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I'm just saying it doesn't look as good as some of the other ATSTs LEGO has made, and also not to mention I think the head itself is a bit too narrow and also a bit too tall, but other than that I think this is a pretty solid set, especially for 2007. And continuing on with ATSTs, at the 22nd spot I had the ATST side build from A038 The Battle of Endor, and for 2009, and especially for it being a side build, they did a pretty good job on this ATST. Now yes, it is a bit too short and the legs are a bit too scrawny compared to the head, but for the most part it looks great and was such an awesome inclusion in this Battle of Endor set back in 2009. Continuing on to the 21st spot, I have one of my all-time favorite sets ever made, being 7671 ATAP Walker from 2008. I don't know what it is about this specific set, but I have a lot of nostalgia for it. When I was a little kid, I always saw the ads and commercials for this set and I always wanted it, and then a few years ago I finally got it, and to this day it's one of my most favorite sets in my collection, although I do have to put nostalgia bias aside and admit this is not very accurate for an ATAP. Really the main problem is that the actual just body or hull of the walker is a bit too wide. It also leans slightly too far forward, but other than those two things, this is a very good set and it's again one of my favorites in my collection. And also you might notice it comes with 2 shock troopers and it's based off of Kashyyyk, which is a decision that I never really understood, but at the same time I always kind of thought the shock troopers looked good with this walker. And now finally making our way into the top 20, at the 20th spot I have 75254 ATST Raider, and honestly I actually think this set is kind of underrated. I feel like a lot of people sort of overlook it. Yes, it's not as good as a normal ATST, but I really don't think LEGO could have done much better with what they were trying to do. They were trying to capture that old rusted ATST that was in season 1 of The Mandalorian, and I think they did a great job. You could make the argument that it does look a bit tacky, which is true, but at the same time I think it looks pretty cool. And speaking of underrated, at the 19th spot I have a very underrated and forgotten about set, being 75177 First Order Heavy Scout Walker. Now this set does get quite a bit of hate for the people that actually know of this set, 1 because it's based off of The Last Jedi, and 2 because it was actually never even seen in the movie. This set is based strictly off concept art and was released a few months before the actual movie came out, and when the actual movie came out, the scenes with this walker were not in the final cut. So it did make LEGO look a bit dumb for making a set that wasn't in the movie, but at the same time, if you knew the backstory, it didn't really matter. And as for the build itself goes, I think it's really interesting, and I also really like the head design. I like how it's basically just a massive cannon that can tilt back and forth. It reminds me of something from Halo actually, which also might be a reason that I'm a bit biased towards this set, just because I really like Halo and this reminds me of something from Halo, but that's beside the point. There's also a feature where you can like roll it around and the legs will move and it looks like it's walking, which is also pretty cool. But still, the coolest thing about it to me is the head design. I just think it's awesome, and I think it's definitely deserving of the top 20. Continuing on to the 18th spot, I have 75261 Clone Scout Walker 20th Anniversary Edition. And like I briefly mentioned earlier with the ATRT from the 501st Battle Pack, I, for the most part, like the oversized ATRTs because LEGO can just add a lot of detail on them, and that's what they did with this set, and I think it looks really cool. Yes, again, it is way too oversized, which isn't accurate, but I feel like for me at least, it's a bit excusable in this case just because it looks awesome. There's a great amount of detail in this set, the color scheme is awesome, the dark tan and the sand green just look really nice together. The only downside with the Walker, to me at least, is that it doesn't really have that like lean forward look that ATRTs are supposed to have, but other than that, I really like this build. And continuing on with ATRTs, at the 17th spot, I have 75250 Clone Scout Walker. This is the original version of the set that I just talked about, and I absolutely love this set so much. It's one of my favorites of all time. I have like 3 of them. It's so simple. Its original retail price was only $10, and it was just a Walker and a Clone Trooper. And yes, objectively, the detailing on this one is not as good as the previous one that I just talked about. However, the reason that I put it one spot higher is because it does have that sort of leaning forward look that ATRTs are supposed to have that I just mentioned that the last one doesn't have, and I think that simple little look just gives this Walker so much more character, and that's why I put it one spot higher. And then up next at the 16th spot, I have yet another oversized ATRT, and I promise this is the last one on the list, being 75002 ATRT from 2013. And man, I think this set is just awesome. Again, all the stuff I've said about oversized ATRTs applies to this. It's got detail, yes it's too oversized, but the detail makes up for it. And the reason I put this as the best out of the oversized ATRTs is just because I really like the blue and white color scheme. And you might be thinking, oh, the 2020 model has the blue and white color scheme too. Well, this one actually has proper ATRT shaping, so that's why I put it at the top. The area around the driver's seat has a way better shaping than the 2020 model, and the model as a whole just looks a bit sleeker and a bit cleaner, and that's why I think it's the best oversized ATRT. Anyways, moving on to the 15th spot, this one might be a bit of a hot take because I have what is considered to be one of the most legendary sets of all time, and that's 7675 ATTE Walker. Now, don't get me wrong, for 2008, I think the set is incredible, and it was definitely a significant upgrade from the 2003 model. However, I will go so far to say that it is a bit overrated. There are a lot of people that would probably put this in the top 10 or maybe even the top 5, and I think it's good, but it's just not that good because I think it's a little bit, actually it's pretty outdated. Compared to the 2003 model, they definitely nailed the size and the leg shaping and the body shaping, although there's just these massive gaps, especially right in the middle. Like if you look at it straight down, there's just a massive gap and it does not look that appealing. And I think the 2 side and middle legs, the big legs, stick out a bit too far. They should be a bit more vertical or at a steeper angle. But other than that, like I said, this was a great set for 2008. It's very iconic and it's definitely a staple of Clone Wars sets. I just think the large gaps are pretty unappealing and the middle legs stick too far out. But still, I mean, after all, I put it at the 15th spot out of 33 sets. I think that's pretty good. Moving on to the 14th spot, this also might be a bit of a hot take, but I have 10178 Motorized Walking AT-AT. Now, this set is absolutely legendary. If you don't know why, it's actually got a Lego motor on the inside and it actually walks. The legs move when you turn the motor on and it walks like an AT-AT. Off the top of my head, this is the only Lego Star Wars set I can think of that has any type of feature like this, and that's really awesome. And that feature where you could have a walking AT-AT is the sole purpose that it made it all the way to the 14th spot, because the AT-AT itself does not look that great, especially compared to all the other models. The legs and the under portion of the body are very bare bones. There's lots of Technic showing, and it also just kind of has like a slumped down stature and is not really upright like AT-ATs are supposed to be. So that's my reason for not putting it any higher. I know a lot of you guys would want this in the top 10 or maybe even the top 5, and I think it's good. I just don't think it's that good. I mean, again, the actual functionality of it walking is incredible, but in my opinion, that's really all it has to offer, so that's why I didn't put it any higher, but I think the 14th spot is pretty good. Up next at the 13th spot, I have a very underrated set, being 75083 AT-DP. If you don't know, this is the main Imperial Walker that is shown all throughout Rebels Season 1 and 2, and I think LEGO did a very good job at recreating it here, and I honestly would go so far to say that I don't really think they could have done any better. It's big and it's also properly scaled with the minifigures, and it is also an awesome display piece, and I really just don't have anything bad to say about it, except the fact that the actual Walker in universe does look a bit goofy, and that's why I didn't put it any higher. But as for LEGO's part goes of recreating this vehicle, they did a very good job. Next up, at the number 12 spot, I have one of the most legendary sets and legendary walkers ever made, being the ATOT from 10195 Republic Dropship with ATOT. Now this set as a whole is super legendary and awesome, mainly because of the dropship, but for this video we're just focusing on the ATOT, and I have to say for 2009 they did a pretty dang good job with the ATOT. Obviously for the time period the dropship was way better. I think the dropship was way ahead of its time for 2009, and the ATOT is kind of a little bit behind that, but that does not make it a bad build. I think it looks great and it's a really unique walker. Obviously it's not going to be as sleek and as detailed as it would be if they remade it today in 2024, although again for 2009 they did a very good job on it. Continuing on to the number 11th spot, I have 8129 AT-AT Walker. Now this was the second standalone AT-AT Walker they made. The first one came out in 2003, and I actually consider this one, excluding the motorized one, to be sort of the weakest playscale AT-AT, and I'm not saying it's a bad set. I mean, all the AT-ATs are very good, even the motorized one. I mean, I put it in the top 20 after all, but this one compared to the others is just not as great. My main problem is that it's a bit too small, but other than that, it looks very good. For 2010, I'd say it was actually a few years ahead of its time. It's pretty well detailed and has the big upright stature that an AT-AT is supposed to have. It is a bit fragile though, which is another downside I forgot to mention, but that's not that big of a deal. I think the set is great. It's just, in my opinion, the weakest playscale AT-AT, excluding the motorized one. And now finally making our way to the top 10, at the number 10 spot, I actually have another AT-AT, being the original 4483 AT-AT from 2003. And man, I have to say for 2003, this set is insanely impressive. I'd honestly even go so far to say that it might be the best set that was released that year. And looking at how accurate it is to its source material, it's literally leagues above every other set that was released that year and in that era in general. It really is just a great build that represents an AT-AT very, very well, although it is a fairly fragile build, especially the head area, and that's why I didn't put it any higher on the list. But again, for 2003, it was a very, very impressive set, and I think it's definitely deserving of the top 10. Moving on to the number 9 spot, I have a fan favorite in a set that I just reviewed actually, being 75234 AT-AP Walker. Now this is the latest variant of this set that we have gotten, being released in 2019, and while I don't think it's the best AT-AP they've made, I still think they did a pretty good job on it. It's a great build all around and represents the Walker pretty well, although my only problem with it, and the reason I didn't put it up higher on the list, and the same reason I don't think it's the best AT-AP, is because I think it leans just a little bit too far forward. I know AT-APs are supposed to lean forward like this, but this one just leans a bit too far forward, and it doesn't really have the sort of upright stature that these walkers are supposed to have, but other than that, this is a great set. Anyways, continuing on to the number 8 spot, I actually have a sequel set, being 75189 First Order Heavy Assault Walker from 2017, and in my opinion, this is one of the best sequel sets, if not the best sequel set that LEGO has made, and I've said this time and time again, the sequels are not great movies, but the character designs, the trooper designs, the ship and vehicle designs are really, really awesome, and I think this is a great example of that. The ATM-6 is a very, very aggressive and menacing looking walker, and I think LEGO did a very, very good job at recreating it here. And now my only slight issue with it is just there's an overwhelming amount of dark gray used in this set, and I know a lot of Star Wars sets are completely gray, especially light gray, but for some reason the dark gray just stands out, I guess, a little bit more than the light gray to me. I don't know why, but the overwhelming amount of dark gray does kind of get annoying after a while. I think it really would have helped if they actually would have sprinkled some black pieces in throughout the build. That would have made it look more interesting in my opinion, but other than that slight nitpick, this is a very good set. Moving on to the number 7 spot, I have one of my favorite sets of all time, being 75153 AT-ST Walker, and in my opinion, this is by far the best standard AT-ST, and I say standard because there has been another slight variant that was made in 2022 that I'll get to, but as it goes for normal looking AT-STs, this is by far the best one they've made. On the outside, it looks incredible. The shaping and proportions is pretty much 100% accurate, although as some of you might know, there is one big downside with this set, and that's that it only fits one pilot on the inside when there's supposed to be two. Some people might not care. I mean, I honestly don't care that much. I mean, it's still an inaccuracy, which I don't appreciate, but it doesn't bother me that much just because it looks so good on the outside. But if it could seat two pilots, it definitely would be a few spots higher. And then continuing on to the number 6 spot, I have the other AT-ST variant I was talking about, being 75322 Hoth AT-ST. Now, I'm not sure if there's actually canonically two different versions of the AT-ST in Star Wars, but very clearly in episode 5 on Hoth, the AT-STs in the background do look a bit different than they did in episode 6. They're a bit smaller, a bit scrawnier looking, and they kind of lean forward a bit more, and that's why this one looks so much different than all the other AT-STs. And I honestly think this AT-ST is just as good as the AT-ST that I just talked about, although I'm putting it one spot higher because I personally just like the look of the Hoth AT-STs more than the normal ones, and I think LEGO just did a pretty much 100% perfect job of recreating it here. Now finally making our way into the top 5, at the number 5 spot, I have 75043 AT-AP Walker from 2014. Now I know it's probably a bit controversial that I put this one so far ahead of the 2019 model, which a lot of people consider to be the best model of this walker, and the 2019 model is good. I just think this model right here from 2014 is a bit better and does a better job at capturing the walker, and the main reason for that is that it just simply does not lean as far forward as the 2019 one does. It leans forward slightly like they're supposed to, but not as far, and it still has that upright stature of an AT-AP, and actually looks like the big massive artillery walker that it's supposed to be, and I think they just did a very good job on it. Anyways, continuing on to the number 4 spot, I have another fan favorite being 75019 ATTE from 2013, and this model was such a significant upgrade from the 2008 version, and of course an upgrade from the 2003 model, and I have to say it's pretty much perfect. LEGO did a great job on the body design and the leg design. It's pretty much 100% accurate, although my one small nitpick or complaint about it is actually one of the same complaints that I had about the 2008 model, is that I think the two middle legs just stick out slightly too far and they should be a bit more vertical, but other than that, this set is pretty much perfect. And then making our way into the top 3, at the number 3 spot, I have 75054 AT-AT from 2014, and I don't really have much to say about this set other than that it's pretty much perfect. One very small nitpick I have is that the hole or body area is just a bit too short, but other than that, I think LEGO did a great job, and this was easily one of the best sets from 2014, and I think it's definitely deserving of the top 3. Now finally making our way to the top 2 spots, I'm pretty sure you guys know which 2 sets are left, and I think both these sets are pretty much equally great, and they're really interchangeable for which one is at the first and which one is at the second spot. But anyways, at the number 2 spot, I have 75337 ATTE Walker from 2022, and this is arguably one of the most hyped up sets that's ever been released. It is the perfect LEGO AT-AT, and I genuinely do not think they could have done any better on the actual model itself. The Clone Troopers, on the other hand, are a different topic that I'm not talking about in this video because this is about walkers, so just focusing on the actual build in this set, it's great. I really do not think they could have done any better. All the proportions are perfect, there's no big gaps, the two big middle legs on the side don't stick out like they do on the other ones, there's really just no flaws with it. And then lastly, at the number 1 spot, the best LEGO Star Wars Walker playset in my opinion is 75288 AT-AT from 2020, and like I said, this set is definitely interchangeable for the number 1 spot with the ATTE that I just talked about, but in my personal opinion, I just like this one a little bit more. Literally everything I said about the ATTE applies to this model too, because it literally is just the perfect build of its source material. It's pretty much 100% accurate in terms of proportion and shaping and all of that stuff. Obviously it's not minifigure scale, so I guess it's 99% accurate, but still this is a great set. It's pretty much a timeless AT-AT, and in my opinion it is the number 1 LEGO Star Wars Walker set. Anyways guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Let me know what you think about my list down in the comments below. If you agree, go ahead and say that, and if you disagree, go ahead and say that too. If you're new, please consider subscribing, and if you want to check out more of my videos, you can see them on the end screen right now.